Welcome to the Heartbeat Podcast with your host, Mike Summer, where CIOs get what they won't hear anywhere else. Candid insights, real strategies, and the truth about leading tech in a world that's changing faster than ever.
Welcome back to Heartbeat Tactical Insights for CIOs. Today, we have a special guest joining us, Tim Winders, AVP of IT and Deputy CIO of Purdue University. Tim is a passionate, student-centered leader with over 25 years of experience guiding higher education institutions through transformation, always keeping financial stewardship, operational excellence, and equitable access to academics at the forefront. Known for his authenticity and skill at connecting across diverse stakeholders, Tim has built a reputation for strategic planning, transparent budget management, and nimble solution implementation. A true collaborator, Tim consistently brings people together to achieve meaningful and measurable change, all the while ensuring students have success and remain in their top priority. So in this conversation, we'll dive into Tim's approach to leading transformational initiatives in higher ed, exploring how he fosters a culture of inclusion and relationship building, and discuss the critical balance between technology and budgetary discipline. Tim's story promises powerful insights, not just for higher ed CIOs, but for every technology leader. So Tim, let's get started.
Wow, what a great introduction and welcome. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
So let's talk about your path on how you became a deputy CIO in higher ed. Can you walk us through your journey and how that became?
I've been in higher education information technology for 30 years. I started out leading and running the IT department at Community College South Plains College in Texas. Was there for 20 years when the opportunity in the Purdue system came up to be the inaugural vice chancellor for information services for the new Purdue University Northwest. This was a unification of two separate regional universities within the Purdue system. So I was tasked with was essentially an M&A, merger and acquisition activity to merge the two universities together. So we had two separate IT systems, organizations. You imagine all the student information systems, ERP, network security, everything. And it was my responsibility to make sure that those came together while also building the same infrastructure across the academic units and building this new university. So that was back in 2015. I've been in the Purdue system for almost 10 years now. And recently, about 3 years ago, we started a centralization effort across the Purdue system where we took all of our distributed IT, all of Purdue, and we centralized those into a new Purdue IT organization. So what was central IT before we started of about 300 or so individuals became a central Purdue IT organization of over 600. And in that reorganization, I moved from being the vice chancellor at one of the regionals at Purdue Northwest into the deputy CIO role for the entire Purdue system.
When did you realize that technology could fundamentally reshape the student and faculty experience, especially at Purdue?
I think that technology is a really exciting way to look at life. I think that for me, I was excited about computers and what technology could be back in my early high school and early university days, where I ran a bulletin board system and we connected different people before the internet even existed, and seeing the impact that computers at the time could have, for example, working with the chemistry department and ChemDraw to create organic chemical structures and draw these on the screen, which it would take hours trying to draw them by hand. And now we can manipulate them on the computer and in 3D. This is back in the late 80s, early 90s. So we've seen technology that has had significant impact on how we think about engaging with our students, with research, and with how we learn in much different ways over the last many decades. So when you ask me, when did I first learn this? Way before I came to Purdue. And now it's a matter of trying to look at the best ways that we can use technology to enhance the student experience, the student journey, and really help our students succeed with the persistence through their undergraduate and graduate experiences across the entire university.
Thank you for that. Sometimes the best way to look forward is to go back and see how things were done in the past. So was there a pivotal event or lesson that most influenced your approach to digital transformation that you're applying today?
Oh, there's a lot of things that I've done throughout the years, right? So it could be thinking back to just simple early days of email and the web, early days of learning management systems, and taking online supplemental education that used to be more like correspondence work to something engaging with our students. But when I think about how I operate today and some of the transformative ways that I think about how we as CIOs need to lead and work through digital transformation, it was certainly the unification of the two universities that became Purdue Northwest. And looking back at that project, bringing together two disparate student information systems to create a new one that has to incorporate the academic history of two different universities that have 50, 60 years of data in them to bring forward into a single new information system that makes sense is clearly a very challenging IT project. And so I use that example of today how I work with IT projects and ensure that we do things from a methodical, strategic perspective, engage our stakeholders, understand the business. And while that was clearly an IT project, is minimize the things that we do that are IT for IT's sake, and really understand how we take what we want to do in IT and connect it to the business and business outcomes, right? So for us in higher education, that's going to be our student experience, our student learning outcomes, our graduation rate, our retention rate. So those type of things. In other businesses, right, it might be ROI or revenue, reduced expenses, however you calculate that in your individual industry. So for me, I think really stepping back from chasing the shiny object to understanding what the need of the business is and why we are going to endeavor on this particular pathway that's likely a technology project, and do my best to not make it all about IT or all about technology, but make it about the business outcomes and how this is going to improve what we're doing as an organization. I think that's the biggest takeaway that I have in how I operate today versus what I probably did early career.
That's really insightful. Thank you. So there's a lot of emerging trends that are taking place right now. It seems like AI is the buzzword that if you can just attach it to a project or initiative, there's almost guaranteed funding.
Yes.
What do you feel is one of the under the radar technology trends that you believe could significantly impact universities, and why aren't more people talking about it?
Well, I mean, right, everybody's talking about it. I want to connect back to what I was just talking about related to business outcomes. I think too often we're looking for that next blinky light, shiny object thing that we're going to buy that's just going to magically transform and make everything better, right? I'm going to buy this new ERP and it's going to improve my student experience outcomes and retention. I'm going to buy this new ERP and it's going to create a whole slew of new applications and students coming in, and I'm going to increase my yield. I'm going to buy this new platform and it's going to allow me to engage with my alumni and increase my development efforts by tenfold, right? Those are all about technologies without stepping back and asking myself, how am I going to change my business processes in order to leverage this technology? And can I change my business processes to improve what I'm doing without changing my technology? And if we start with our business processes, we start with our business leaders to understand what outcome do you want to get to, and how do you do that today? Then we could often step through their business processes through a simple BPM, business process mapping process, to look at what are you doing to understand how can I create efficiencies? How can I remove waste? How can I create automation through here to ultimately affect what you want for your outcome, which is usually, right, a higher yield, whether that's dollars or students or student outcomes. And And I think that is the underlying current that we're not doing enough of. We're not stepping back to the basics and saying, what is our business process that we want to try to optimize? Because too often we'll take these AI technologies and we'll apply automation to a broken process, and all we have is broken automation. And we don't get anywhere. So we really need to focus in and work with our business leaders on improving processes and be introspective on what does a customer journey look like? How many of you, so folks from the higher education perspective, how many of you as CIOs have actually gone through and applied to the school and tried to register for classes and try to pay for that? Do you know what your customer or student journey looks like? Have you actually been a customer of your own business? If you haven't, step back and do that, and you'll learn very quickly some of the pain points that your customers experience. Start there instead of trying to say AI is going to fix all my problems.
I think that's such a good way of looking at it. And I feel that oftentimes, like you said, we chase the shiny object, but we're not looking at the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And whether it's going and walking through the experience of registering as a student or that student experience, oftentimes when we look to bring in new technologies, we simply want to lift and shift or take our old ways of doing things and apply it to a new technology without taking a step back and saying, is there a new way of doing things? Is there a better way of doing things that will help us get to the business outcome faster versus just simply repeating the process because it may be broken and we may not know any better? And I'm curious, in the university setting, do you look to other universities to see who's doing that process the best and simply leveraging that best practice? Or are universities wanting to own the entire experience and have everything custom because there's brand association to this is how we've always done it? We want to continue from a legacy point of view of continuing on this experience. Can you speak to that a bit?
I would say in higher ed, we are extremely collaborative. So
Okay.
you often look to peers. We often look to aspirational institutions or those across the country to find out who are the exemplars in doing this. It might be simply we've got a community of CIOs and asking, we're looking at replacing our student information system. Who's done this recently? We're working with marketing communication to implement a new CMS. What CMS are you using and are you happy with it? We're moving to manage desktops, who's using different platforms, and go on and on. CUI and research and high performance computing, and how do you scale to the cloud or not? And who has repatriated data from different cloud services. So we are often asking others, who has already tackled this problem? How did you do it? What lessons learned did you have? What would you do differently? And that's very common in the higher education space. I don't know what happened then outside of the higher ed space, if those type of things exist. I do know that I'm a member of a number of different CIO organizations locally and nationally. And those communities of CIOs are really supportive in asking those same type of questions. And it's often that we can reach out to a peer, a colleague, a friend, somebody else to say, hey, who's tackled this challenge and how'd you solve it? Or what third-party vendor have you used that helped you that you would recommend? So who and word of mouth and building those networks, CIO networks, extremely valuable. And I think most of us probably have if you've been a CIO for more than a few years, probably have a pretty good network with inside your own industry. I would challenge you to step outside of your industry and figure out how you can build networks outside of your industry to understand, what don't I know? One of the biggest things is we all have blinders, right? I know what I know, but I don't know what I don't know. And that's where we all get trapped. And if I'm staying within inside my own bubble of higher ed CIOs, then what I hear from them is probably the same things that I already know. So stepping outside of higher ed and occasionally listening and hearing to trials and tribulations, or how did you solve this problem? Or why are you using this vendor? Helps me fill in some of those blanks of trying to keep current, which is impossible these days.
You and I grew up in a world where probably networking meant you physically went to a place and sat next to a physical person and established a relationship. I feel like post COVID and just in this remote working world that we have, a lot of the relationships are built digitally and are built where you might not even have a screen up and it just might be a voice or texting back and forth through some of these different formats like Teams or Slack. How important do you think it is for CIOs going forward to actually get re-engaged with both peers and colleagues of physical face-to-face interaction to really establish that network? Do you think it's important or do you think we can stay to just digital only?
I think it's critical. I think it is essential. Getting back face to face and meeting people is invaluable. And as an example, had an event this week where I did just that, right? We had a dinner of about 40 or so CIOs, and we networked and talked about things that are of interest to us. You had a few vendor sponsors that were there that we could engage with, but it wasn't a heavy sales environment. We had roundtable discussions primarily focused on AI, but because it was mixed industry, could hear from people across the board. Coincidentally, at this event, I ran into a CIO of a partner that we use at Purdue, and we struck up a conversation, had never met, and realized we have some common pain points for things that we do on campus. And because we happen to meet, we are going to sit down with our teams and work through these pain points that neither one of us really had as an agenda for us to try to fix. But now, because we know each other and we met face to face, we're going to be able to sit down, get these things resolved and fixed. And it's just going to improve the relationship significantly just because we happen to meet face to face. So I think that personal interaction is absolutely critical.
One of the things I've been hearing, especially in the higher ed, is how do new technologies get adopted and what are the thresholds for allowing new technologies to come onto campus? When we're looking at things like AI, massive disruptive technologies are coming out, and some of them have cybersecurity in mind, and there's data integrity, and they comply with a lot of rules and regulations to make sure the information is kept secure. And there's some companies that are coming out and it's flashy, and you realize that their fundamentals are not keeping the data secure. How are you building for the future, knowing that this is something that is going to be a daily platform that people will engage with, but there's a balance of how do you ensure there's security in place as well?
It is an absolute struggle and challenge. And I don't know that we have a good answer for any of this across the board. Let's talk about Gen AI specifically. To approach this in a way where we understand and expect that individuals are students, faculty, staff, right? They've got their consumer behaviors. And then we have what we do at the university. We want to make sure that what we're doing at the university remains secure in that we're not giving out our confidential data, our student information, any proprietary IP, anything else out to any of these LLMs. So we've created a couple of different things. Make sure that everybody has access to a commercial LLM that we have an enterprise agreement with. And then we also have developed systems in-house where we have open LLMs that run on our own equipment, own hardware on site that's available for anybody to use. And the data never leaves our data center. It's not used to retrain our own models, et cetera. So we create environments where people can experiment and use these in safe ways. But right now, it's really down to policy that says you don't use these LLMs. You don't put your data here. You only do it here. And DLP, data loss prevention, is a real thing. And trying to figure out how to implement technologies to make sure that individuals are behaving in a way that match our policies is a constant evolution and battle to try to play this cat and mouse game, right, around escalations of cybersecurity, attack and defense. So It's a big thing. We try to be innovative and bring in new technologies and let our students and faculty use approved technologies and platforms that we provide access to. A lot of times they'll go off to a conference or talk to a colleague and say, "Hey, what about this? Or can we use this?" And then we have to go through the cycles of understanding. All right, is it secure? Is it accessible? What's a licensing agreement look like? Do we use this for academic purposes, for research purposes, for administrative purposes? Does it fit within our ecosystem, everything else that we're doing? Do you want this to integrate with our student information system? Is it going to collect student data or not? So there's a whole long list of questions that most people don't think about before they say, "Hey, I want to use this new tool." The constant barrage of vendors coming out with new tools and technologies that are going to solve all of our problems is really exhausting. It really is exhausting.
When you hear the word governance, is this a term that you think this is a good thing because it helps provide safeguards, it helps to provide some guardrails that we don't fall off the cliff? Or do you feel it's a word that is overbearing and is more stifling of innovation? Where would you say you fall when you hear this term?
Both and all across the spectrum. So higher education is rooted in shared governance. And so personally, in most cases, embrace and shared governance in that it helps me to bring my campus along in organizational change, right? Whether it's a new technology or policy change or whatever. Governance helps us to create an informed constituent group. It allows us to seek input and relevance. It's almost when I'm writing an RFC and we have a period for open comments. You want to comment on it on RFC, right? I can use the governance process in order to receive comments back from my constituents. Governance does not, shared governance does not mean democracy, right? It doesn't mean everybody gets a vote and they can say, "No, we're not going to do this." It is informed consent. It's informed decision-making processes where we can share information back to the campus community. We can hear what they are saying. And then also, if we completely miss the mark, we can pivot and shift. So I think it's a really good place when done right. And I think people who bristle at the idea of shared governance have had really bad experiences because it's treated like a democracy where you have governance groups that get to veto or shut down things, or it's shared governance is where ideas go to die. Everybody got this great idea. I'm going to send it to committee because I don't want to deal with it anymore. So let's send it over there to that committee and it gets shut down, and it's gonna take them a year to come up with a statement or response. So I don't have to deal with it. And I think if you use shared governance as a weapon, then you probably bristle at that thought. And so when I run up against individuals, that want to try to weaponize governance, it's a bad word. It's definitely a bad word. But if we use it for positive outcomes, then I embrace that. I think it also helps us to do some things like set standards and policies. If you think about data governance, it's extremely important to make sure that we have the right people on board and our constituents involved, all of our users and different stakeholders engaged in those conversations, especially when we're starting data governance from the beginning, so that we can do things like create common definitions and an understanding of what things mean, right? If you have ever worked with a higher education institution and you talk to institutional research or somebody from student affairs or somebody from housing and you ask people, how many students we have here, you're going to get different answers because, what everybody thinks of, what a student is means something different. What do you mean? Full-time students? Do you mean, first year students? Do you mean, freshmen? Do you mean continuing? Do you mean transfer? What does a student mean to you? So data governance is a subset of governance. Is critically important that we are all defining things the same way and that we're using the same data sets, data sources, and how we access and count and pull that information. Yeah, to answer your question originally, I'm a pretty strong proponent of governance when done right.
It's funny when you saying basically data dictionary and defining basic terms. What popped to mind is I wonder if we need a definition of what a student is, because it's a pretty common understood that as soon as you broke down the different versions, it became quite clear that yes, you do need a definition of what a student is.
You really do. It's amazing, right? It's the same thing as that. Ask the same questions. Okay, how many faculty do we have? What does that mean to you? Is that tenured faculty? Is that adjunct faculty? Is that faculty that are tenure track but haven't got tenure yet? Is it our senior professors? What does the faculty mean to you? It's the same, right? It's the same thing across the board. We have to define what these things mean so that we're all talking the same language.
Absolutely. So you and I spoke earlier about how the experience of what we've been through has affected today. We went from where you had to be in person to where we went completely remote, and now we're bringing back a hybrid. In your view, is there a best way to run an IT department? Is it having physically everyone in one place? Can you have distributed or hybrid models? What would be your advice for CIOs who are struggling with this exact issue right now?
This is so controversial today. And I would say I don't think there's a single right answer. So much of it comes down to your individual culture, capabilities of your staff, and expectations of your campus or your constituents that you support. We, as a society, and especially in IT, have started to come to expect that this hybrid or remote work. And if somebody can't work remote, then they're just going to walk away and leave. And that might be a good thing for you. It might be an absolute horrible thing for you. A hybrid and remote work takes a significant amount of diligence. It takes the right manager, it takes the right employee, and it takes a lot of work. And I think that's why I couched my answer by saying there is a right answer. If you've got a manager that doesn't know how to support remote employees, that doesn't know how to build a collaborative team in a hybrid or remote environment, then that manager and their team is going to suffer. If you've got employees that don't know what this means or don't know what the expectation should be, then that team is going to suffer. If we're dealing with hybrid and remote, technology becomes extremely important. Do I have the right collaborative tools in place? Do I have IT policies in place that foster collaboration? Or am I trying to track what people are doing every minute of the day in order to make sure that they're being productive and are doing their jobs? Do I spend more time tracking what they're doing than actually getting work done? Do I do the same thing if people are in person, right? Do I treat in-person employees the same way that I treat remote employees? If I've got a hybrid situation and I have a meeting where some people are in person and some people are remote, do the remote employees get left out? Are they fully incorporated? Can they hear what's going on? If I've got 10 people in a meeting room and 10 people remote, can the 10 remote people hear everybody in the meeting room? Can they hear it all? So I think that the technology involved in this is so difficult. Have I created ways to virtually replicate the happenstance water cooler and hallway conversations that just happen? Do I am able to just get up and walk around the corner virtually and ask somebody a quick question because I know they're not on the phone. I can just look in their office and say, "Hey, can you help me with this thing real fast?" It takes the right set of people. Having said that, I support it. I support remote and hybrid workers. I've been doing this and supporting remote and hybrid teams for more than 10 years. COVID demonstrated that we can do this across the board. And I think it makes it really hard to justify and say why I can't. And often the why I can't comes down to me saying, I don't trust you.
It's interesting you say that. I feel that I don't want to say an older generation, but a generation that has more cycles, meaning they've done this before. They know what to do. They know what's expected of them. They have the responsibility and just the mindset of, I know how to get it done and I will, might be really good for remote because they will just buckle down and do it, but they may not want to. And the generation that wants to work remote may not have the cycles and knowing what is expected of them and how to solve problems. I'm just thinking of someone who's brand new out of college. You may not know all the things you need to know in order to accomplish your goal or to accomplish your task in your job description. So you may want to stay home or work remote because it's a comfortable environment. And I think it's such a hard question to answer. And I appreciate your insight on this because it is a very topical point of conversation right now of what do you do? Because the expectation has been swung so far in one direction that there's a lot of pushback now. And you've got a lot of family dynamics that are needing to be included as well, where, your way of running your household might have really worked well for the past few years. And now if you're expecting back to the office, what does that look like? And what does it look like when you shut down offices and people have to move? You offered some really good insight.
I want to offer a few more insights that continue to complicate the question. Because when you talked about family dynamics and how the household might have changed, that really comes down to an equity question. Am I able to support a diverse and rich environment by having people remote and hybrid? And do I artificially remove that possible equity by forcing everybody to come back to the office? Do I use the guise of equity by saying, okay, I'm going to treat everybody the same. Everybody has to come back in to ultimately go in the other direction. And there, now I'm removing that equity. I think it becomes even more complicated as we start thinking about this forced return to the office. And when we do it for no good reason other than saying, I don't trust you, that becomes a real problem. And I think that poor managers and leaders will force a return to the office because they don't want to have the hard conversations around performance management. They don't want to hold individuals accountable for not getting their jobs done, or they don't want to do the hard work of setting what those expectations are in the first place, right? If you don't ever set expectations with your employees of this is what you need to get done, then how do they know that they're on the right track? And when you tell them you're not doing your work, you have to come back to the office when you never told them what their work was, that's on the manager, that's on the leader. So I think that this forcing people to come back to the office is really leaders saying, I don't want to do the work.
That's a really insightful way of answering it. I'm glad you brought up those parts of setting expectations and a collaborative approach of this is what I expect you to get done. How you get it done is up to you. And there's flexible options. You can be in person, remote, whatever works. And almost to raise the expectations. And I think that encourages those that need to be in person will come in person. Those who just need to put their head down and get work done will choose that option as well. And to allow for that flexibility where you can bring some of the better people. You might want to bring someone who might not be physically down the road to your office because they are the best cultural fit. They are the solution to the problem that you have. That if you have a more flexible approach, you might actually be able to engage with that person versus saying you have to fit into this box. And if you don't fit into this box or meet these expectations, not a fit. So I really do appreciate that. Just a few more questions. And so this is more kind of personal. What would you give as advice to your younger self, knowing what you know now? Would you have done anything differently, or would you provide any advice to someone looking to get into the career that you're in, where you wish someone had told you maybe some shortcuts or some things to do or to avoid?
I don't think there's any shortcuts. I think that it's a lot of hard work and being excited and passionate. I think the advice to my younger self would be always have fun, both in life and in your career. And if you're not having fun in both of those, look at yourself and try to figure out why. And don't skip vacation. Again, going back to my younger self, I work all the time and I didn't take enough time for myself, for my family to just go and be, because I was so driven that these things had to get done. And if I didn't do them, then they weren't going to happen. And today, I think most of us realize and expect the work is going to be there. It's going to always be there. And so take the time to take care of yourself, take vacation. If you're not having fun at work, then question why you're there. If you're not having fun in your personal life, question why not? And how can you make changes to do that? How can you surround yourself with other people that will help you just smile and enjoy the day?
There are so many different points of information that you and I have to keep abreast of. And we spoke to this a little bit earlier, where you used to be able to read a blog or read a magazine and be somewhat up on what was happening in the industry or in your sphere of influence. And now the information is overwhelming. Do you have any favorite podcasts, books, video podcasts that you listen to that you would recommend other CIOs pay attention to as some parting wisdom?
Some parting wisdom. I read as much as I possibly can. We talked about it a little bit earlier, that the amount of information is really just overwhelming. I subscribe to various different industry specific, Chronicle of Higher Education and Inside Higher Ed and various other email and news things that I read and get. Business side, Harvard Business Review, I'll follow and read. On the technology side, I read everything from things that are intended for consumers because I'm just very interested in that technology, to vendor specific blogs or tools that either I'm interested in personally or that we run or use in the organization or that I might want to learn about. And then today with social media, you mostly stick to LinkedIn professionally, what other people are posting that I like, and you'll follow what they're reading. And then the social connections make it pretty easy to use spider web and cascade how to find different information. So for me, I don't think the problem so much is finding information, it's having the cycles to consume it all. And even with AI that can go out and find the different sources, and you prioritize and collate and you summarize and create an audio file for me to listen to, there's time. Time is our resource that is the limiting factor. And it's just impossible to try to read and learn about everything that's out there when the information is changing on a could be a daily basis. So a great example, I was at this event that I was at the other night. In the introductory remarks, one of the people was talking about AI and AI models, and they said, so whether you're using a Claude 3.7 or DeepSeek R2, and I'm like, wait a minute, those just came out this week. Did you just update your speech to update the relevant point versions in this to reference the most recently released models by these specific vendors? Holy cow. So trying to keep up with that, if you mention something specific, if you didn't check right then, you could be wrong.
Yeah.
It's so hard to keep up. And it's important to have fun, focus on what drives your passion, what you are interested in. And for me, if I'm not enjoying something, then it's going to be a lot harder for me to learn about it.
And that actually leads into the last question I have for you. So, having achieved as much as you have in your career, what remains one of the most important things that drives you in what you're doing?
Yeah. For me, it's my family. It really is. Seeing my kids turn into adults, graduating from university, getting married, and becoming these human beings that are just amazing, that are friendly, that are succeeding in their own ways is joyful for me. It's so rewarding to just know that in some way I'm helping make the world a better place. And that's a lot of what makes me happy and drives me.
Tim, what a wonderful way to finish. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining today and for sharing your thoughts. And you've really offered some interesting perspectives and insights. And once again, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. This has been a great pleasure. I really appreciate it.